Ontario's new federal boundaries would leave the City of Toronto with one less seat in the House of Commons. And the MP for Don Valley East is raising objections about the elimination of that riding and how the decision came to pass. Liberal Member of Parliament Michael Coteau is with me now. Mr. Coteau, good to see you.
Nice to see you. Thanks for having me.
First, before we get into some of your specific objections, let's situate everyone on what's been happening with Don Valley East. How did the final proposal from Ontario's Electoral Boundary Commission differ from its original plan?
Well, the original plan that was presented last year actually expanded the riding of Don Valley East, so it actually grew on the electoral map. And then on February 10th of this year, a new proposal was brought forward based on some of the pressure the Commission must have received through the consultation in Scarborough. But essentially, it ended up dividing the riding into three sections, being absorbed into Don Valley West, Scarborough Centre, and a small piece into Scarborough North.
And look, it's not shocking when we see an MP oppose their riding getting split up, but you're telling the House Procedure Committee meeting today that this would be a devastating mistake. So, beyond the fact that your seat would disappear in the House, what is the case that you're making for Don Valley East?
Well, I've objected to the process. We have a process in place today where a proposal can be put forward and community members can speak about it, then a final report's put forward, and it can drastically shift. That proposal can change so drastically. And because it's the final report, it doesn't allow anyone in the community who's being impacted to actually weigh in on that. And we're talking about electoral boundaries here. This is a fundamental piece of our democracy. So what I'm saying at the end of the day is let people have a say. Let people weigh in on it. And, I recognize the enormous task that the Commission has, and I respect the work that they do. However, they do have the power to extend a consultation, and the recommendations I made to the PROC committee, which is the procedural committee in the House of Commons, that we revisit this entire process, because these complaints are not new. They've stemmed as far back as 20 years from our records. So it's time to do something to change the process so it impacts communities in the future in a more positive way.
Right, and so the committee, the process, so people understand, the committee will take objections that you and other MPs raise about changes across the country. They'll pass those on to the Boundary Commission, but at the end of the day, they're going to produce that final map. Have you had any feedback from the Commission on this beyond their final report since you've seen that?
And this is part of the problem. So on February 10th, we get a brand new map that's really a final document. There is absolutely no way to consult, to talk to people in the community about it, and the only recourse we have is to go to this committee, which I was given 3 minutes. In my neighborhood, we received over 500 emails. We had 1,000 people sign petition. There were 3 consultation meetings, one of them by a community group called Save DVE, and 2 by my office. We've literally had thousands of interactions of people saying, they want to have their say. They want to be able to talk about this. You're essentially taking a North York riding and moving it into a Scarborough riding and disregarding a 100-year-plus border, which was Victoria Park, without any community consultation. All we're saying is we just want to be able to weigh in on the proposal, to have our say, give us that ability to speak.
So let's, in the time we have left, let's talk a bit about the specifics then of what that part of Toronto faces now. The Commission's report said their original proposal faced a lot of criticism for leaving Scarborough underrepresented, that right now Don Valley East has a very low population among all Toronto ridings. And they also say that, when they're working on identifying communities of interest for a riding and how communities come together, they say this can be highly subjective and that they have to look at the whole city and the whole province as they're putting this map together. So based on what they've already said, are you confident that the Commission can heed your arguments?
Well, I think, in all fairness, any of the arguments that are being made by Scarborough or the Commission that it reported on can be applied equally to North York. But the interesting thing is, over the last decade, you remember back in 2015, Don Valley East was a big, healthy riding, and the Commission came in and split it in half to create Don Valley North. So 10 years ago, the riding was split. We have communities, the community I grew up in, Flemington Park, which is an economically challenged neighborhood in many ways, underserviced in many ways. It's being moved 3 times in a decade if this proposal goes through without people having any say in the future direction. And the other thing that these changes do, it disregards the boundaries that are traditionally put in place. So, for example, the police divisions, the hospital catchment areas, our school catchment areas, not-for-profit organizations. I have the 3rd largest Muslim population in all of Canada. It divides that community. And it takes these old communities, these villages like Victoria Village, Fenside, communities like Don Mills, and it divides these communities. And all we're saying is just pause, use your legislative power as a commission, and hold a second consultation. You have the ability to do this within your legislation. Use the ability to run an actual effective consultation, and let's see where we end up. People just want to be heard, that's all. And I just want to finish by saying this. In today's democracy, we have a lot of people who are not buying into the political process because of things like this. And we need to make sure that if we're putting a commission in place to actually embrace and expand democracies by creating better boundaries, let's at least put in place the best practices for consultations so people have their voices heard.
All right, one final question then. The Commission says that some of these same arguments that have been made about diversity within the City of Toronto, within your riding, would apply just as much, if not more, to Toronto suburbs where there's been higher growth than inside the City of Toronto, and that's perhaps one of the reasons why the city has lost one riding under the new map. So, in a situation where perhaps your riding is maintained or it goes back to that original proposal where Don Valley East is expanded, how does that affect representation for other people in the GTA?
Well, it's interesting because if the Commission is saying that, all the arguments they made, why was their original proposal to impact Scarborough? Like, they took the data initially and they analyzed it and they came up with a proposal that impacted Scarborough. All they've done in this situation is listen to the feedback through a proper consultation in Scarborough, and they've just moved the problem to North York. Any of the arguments that have been made in Scarborough can equally apply to North York, especially a community like Flemington Park and Don Mills, which I would say is probably the most diverse and multicultural community in this entire country.
Okay, well, we'll certainly be watching for how the Commission responds, and we'll see what their final map and those final boundaries ultimately look like. Michael Coteau, thanks so much for your time on this.
Thank you for the opportunity.